Hey everybody, it's Jason Allen, the Concrete Pipe Guy, here with another webinar as part of the Oldcastle Academy series. Today's topic is effective presentation techniques, and we will be joined with guest presenter Jason Allen, the former director of the Mountain States Concrete Pipe Association. Now, if that name sounds familiar to you, it should, and I'll get into that in a moment. But first, just a little bit about what we do here at Oldcastle Infrastructure. I'm the technical resource engineer in the Mountain West area. And most people in our area know Oldcastle Infrastructure predominantly because of our reinforced concrete pipe, our box culverts, catch basins, manholes, and other precast products. But we also have some really cool other solutions that I wanted to share with you real quick. Our newest addition here in our Utah market is the gasketed box culvert. So now we use rubber gaskets similar to what you'd see in RCP. And these could provide a watertight joint instead of the soil-tight or silt-tight joints that are typical with mastic joints on box culverts. We also have some very cool stormwater options for you, including storm capture, which uses the strength of reinforced concrete to maximize storage volume for underground detention. We also have some great best management practice products like our dual vortex system and some other oil water separators and some things. So feel free to reach out to us. We'd love to talk to you about some of these stormwater options we have. And we also recently purchased a company called Torrent Resources that specializes in the production and installation of dry wells. So very cool products that we have to share with you. So we're going to jump in here to our presentation. As I mentioned before, it's titled Effective Presentation Techniques. This is actually a presentation that I gave a few years ago when I was the Mountain States Concrete Pipe Association director, and I had a couple of guests on there, some moderators, Randy Wahlen and Mike Blackham, a couple of friends of mine in the industry. And this was a great presentation. It turned out really well. And rather than re-giving it, I thought it would be great to just kind of have a little throwback and see the presentation that we gave a few years ago during COVID. So anyways, without any further ado, I'd like to turn the time over to our guest presenter, Jason Allen. Jason, take it away.
Okay, 3 takeaways that I'm hoping that you take away from this is, first, what makes a good presenter? We're going to talk about what makes a good presentation, and then we're going to provide some tips to make those presentations better. All right, so first question that I usually ask when I talk to people, and I want you to think about for a moment, is why are presentations important? A few things that I've come up with over the years as I've talked about this is that presentations are a very effective way to communicate with groups, right? It's also a way that sometimes we're giving an accountability of what we've been doing and providing an update to people. So it's a good accountability check. And it's also an opportunity for us to try to persuade people. When I was the Morgan County engineer, I was giving a lot of presentations to planning commissions, city councils, and things. And I had to persuade them. If I wanted them to do something and act upon something, I had to use my persuasion to do that. Right now, how we present ourselves is very important. We present every day, so we're all presenters, whether we like it or not. And first impressions do matter. So it's very important that we're rehearsed and that we practice, and that when we're presenting information, whether it's informally or formally, we're putting forward our best foot so that people will take us seriously. Like, giving a webinar series in your pajamas wearing a Batman cowl, like being extremely professional and taking yourself seriously. One rule that I always live by is this: there are no boring topics, only boring presenters. Okay, so keep that in mind as we go through this. That's my mantra and something that I hold to a lot. All right, right now, what I want everybody to do is I want you to visualize and think for just a minute on your favorite teacher, the best teacher you've ever had, your absolutely favorite teacher. What was it about this teacher that made them great? All right, I want to know what you think it was that made them a good presenter. Okay, so think about that for a second. Right? Think about it, and I'm going to ask Mike and Randy. Mike, I'll ask you first, since you've been thinking about this. Tell me about your favorite teacher briefly, and what it was that made them great.
Yeah, Randy, so I thought about it, and I had 2, and they were my favorite because of the same reason. So that's why I can go with 2.
Perfect.
And ironically, as an engineer, it's kind of funny. My worst subjects was English and art. Yeah, those were my two favorite teachers, so I think it speaks volumes about them. And the reason they were my favorite teachers because the way they taught and the way they graded, they did not grade everybody on the same level. So for instance, I sucked at art, period. I was horrible.
Yeah.
But I still had the ability to get an A because he graded me on my skill level and how much effort I put into my art rather than grading the art itself. And that was the same with the English teacher. He graded me on my papers and the content of the paper, not necessarily the grammatical part of the paper. So that's why I liked my teachers, those two teachers, the best.
I like it. Randy, anything you'd like to share?
For me, it was simple. If they made a connection with me outside of teaching, then I would listen to them.
Excellent. Excellent. My favorite teacher was similar to what Mike was talking about. I did not like AP European history. It was just kind of a boring topic. I was never really that into history. As I'm going through AP European history, I never thought to myself, well, when am I ever going to really need this? There's no way America would ever, like, I don't know, elect a fascist president, or there's no way we would ever have like a pandemic sweep across the world that could eradicate 10% of the world's population. Like, that just doesn't happen anymore. That's just ridiculous. Why do I need this information? But my teacher, she really made it come alive because she would dress up in the characters. And so when she was lecturing about Napoleon, she gave the entire presentation dressed as Napoleon. When she was talking about the impact that William Shakespeare had on the world, she dressed up as Shakespeare and gave soliloquies dressed as Shakespeare. She really made it come alive, and she made that connection, kind of what Randy's talking about, making a connection outside of the learning material. I think that's good. Some of the things that I look at when I look at what makes a good presenter is, are they personable? Are they passionate? Are they excited about their material? Are they confident? Confidence is a big deal with being a good presenter. What's the delivery like? How are they delivering it? Like I said, with my teacher, she used to dress up and be one of those characters, and that was a really good thing for me. And lastly, like Randy and I touched on, they were able to make a connection, not just with the subject material, but connecting with the audience and the people that are there. So
Jason,
Randy.
So one of the things I think we get caught up in is not everyone's going to give a PowerPoint presentation all the time or do what Jason does. But whether you're just meeting with developers or contractors or the city council or whoever, you're always kind of giving a presentation. And so I think this is really good, even if it's not a PowerPoint. We've all got to sell ourselves in our job.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree with you more. We are at its heart, all of us salesmen. We're trying to persuade people for things, right? And present information so that people can make informed decisions. That's a lot of what we do as engineers. And so that's a very good point, Randy. We're going to be talking today about some tips to have better presentations. And a lot of that is going to be in what we do in PowerPoint, things we can do in PowerPoint, but also be thinking about how you can implement some of these things. Some of them are more high level about, personality and what makes us good presenters. And these 5 things, whether you're doing a PowerPoint presentation in front of a group of 5 people or 500 people, or whether you're just giving an impromptu presentation and an explanation about a project to a planning commission or a city council, it's all presentation. And these 5 things that make a good presenter should be remembered and tried to emulate: personable, passionate, confident, good delivery, and making a connection with those people. That's really important. So thank you, Randy, for bringing that up. I do agree with that. Okay, so let's move to the next one here and say, what makes a good presentation? And some of the things that I've come up with and that I've noticed over the years as I've given this is that, in my mind, the first thing is that presentation is going to meet the audience's needs. It doesn't do me any good if I'm presenting to a planning commission and I'm talking about things that don't really apply to what I'm trying to accomplish, or I'm speaking to a city council. If I want them to take out a bond for a water line and I don't even give them any reasons why we need this water line, that's not meeting the audience's needs, right? I like to look at this as collaborative learning. Webinars are a little bit more difficult because it's me and maybe a couple of panelists talking the whole time. But I feel like when you're in a good setting where you can learn together and you can build off of one another's ideas and comments, similar to what Randy just did there, coming in and providing some input and feedback on that we're all presenters all the time and we need to improve on that. That's a collaborative learning process. And lastly, we've hit on this so many times, but a good presentation is one that makes a connection to the people that you're presenting to. So those are important. We're going to be focusing on good, better, and best practices today. So some of us may think that we're good. I'm hoping that you can find things to make it better. And then if you think you're in that better category, maybe we're going to look at some things that we can do to be the best. Hopefully we're all looking to progress in our jobs every day. And even though I give a lot of presentations, I'm always looking for opportunities to improve and things that I can do better so that I can be the very best that I can be. So we're going to focus today on good, better, and best. We'll look at some good practices, what makes it better, and how we can be the best. Okay. So first things first, there are some things that you need to do even before you get to the place. Once we've set up and we know we're going to be giving a presentation, here are a few things that I recommend that you look into and that you try to identify early on. First, what's your audience look like? Who are you going to be presenting this to? Is it technical people or is it people with very little technical experience? So you've got to identify that audience. How many people are they going to be? I ask things like, what's their background? How long have they been working with the company? Are they old? Are they young? Because my message may change depending on who my audience is. I can't give the same presentation to every office or to every city or to every planning commission. I have to go in and identify who these people are so that I'm already ahead at making that connection. I also like to ask what the format's going to be. Is it expected to be more of a 1 hour lecture where I just talk the whole time? Is it going to be in a situation where I can collaborate with the team a little bit more, where I can discuss and we have questions and answers and we take times to have breakouts and work things through? What's the format of this presentation going to be? I like to ask a lot of questions about that. Once I know who my audience is and the format that I'm going to be giving there, that's when I do my preparation for my presentation, where I start putting together the content, where I outline it out, and then I start finding things that will work to that, whether it's stories, pictures, videos, different things like that. That's what I like to do with preparing there. So, and then last is practice. Before we even get there, I'm hoping that we have practice, so that we feel very comfortable with the content that we're delivering, right? That to me, and I say it over and over again, that confidence is important. And the way you're confident is that you've been able to practice and you're familiar with the material and you know what you're talking about. So those are some things that I like to do before I even step foot into the arena to give a presentation there. All right. So now we've practiced, we've prepared, we know who our audience is. Now we got to think about, what do we got to do when we're doing this presentation? What type of equipment do I need? So let's say we're doing a PowerPoint presentation and we have some visual aids and things that we're going to be doing, right? I always like to ask, do you have a projector? That's always a good question to ask, because if they don't and you need to do a PowerPoint, it's kind of hard to do it off of your laptop or your Surface, or if you only brought a jump drive to put into a computer and they don't have a way to project it, either a screen or a TV or a projector, we could have a problem. I always look at, if I'm going to bring my own, I want to make sure I've got a projector that has enough lumens, that it's going to be bright enough. Nothing worse than going into a room and having a really light projector where people can't see what you're trying to present. I prefer a wide angle so it doesn't have to be back too far, and so it can throw really to a really close wall and still have a big projection on that. The meeting room is important as well. What's the setup going to look like? What are the lights going to be? What's the light situation? Are you going to have lights on or off? I prefer to have them on because I don't want people falling asleep during my presentation. So I try to change my presentation to make sure that it's one that I can give if the lights are on, so that it's light background, dark text, so that it'll stand out in a light room. And that's why it's important you have a strong projector with a lot of lumens there. The setup, what's it going to look like? What's the room going to look like? What's the setup there? Are you going to have a microphone? Do you need a microphone? Some people have big booming voices. Some people have really quiet voices. What do you need for that? So those are things to go through. When we look at good, better, best, I would say this is the worst situation here. You walk into a room, it's dark. You've got a dark screen there and no one can see the speaker. All right. We've got a little bit of improvement by illuminating the podium there so you can see the speaker at least. But I would say if we're going for better, you'd want to lighten up the room so that people could see it. And if we want to take it even one step further and go good, better, best, see how the difference is on that presentation with a light background? That's kind of a big deal there for me. I like to have those light backgrounds with dark text. Okay. And I'm just going to talk about some basics and things that I've picked up over the years with PowerPoint. All right. So what I always tell people is if you're using PowerPoint, you should show, don't tell. Anything you can to show them what you should do instead of just telling and reading text and putting a lot of text on there. All right. I always like to put 3 takeaways. I've heard from many people that when you're giving an hour presentation or a 30-minute presentation or even a 2-hour presentation, we're really only able to handle 3 things at a time, 3 main items. So what I do is I'll always identify what are those 3 takeaways. What do I want people to take from this presentation? And then I'll build those. I like to show them at the beginning and the end of my presentation so that I show you what we're going to be talking about today. And then at the end, I summarize this is what we've talked about today so that you know what those takeaways are. I've heard other people who don't like to do that, and that's fine. There's really no right or wrong way. As long as you're building your presentation around what are the 3 things that I want people to take away. If you want them to take away 10 things in an hour, you're going to be severely disappointed because they're only going to be able to handle 3. So choose those 3 most important things and take those with and build your presentation around it. Because any more than that, why not just schedule a follow-up presentation if you have more? All right. And lastly, rehearse. Go through it. Make sure your slides are showing up the way you want them to. Make sure that things are working correctly. All right. If you've got animations, make sure those animations are correct. If you've got videos, make sure they play correctly. If you've got images, make sure they're coming in correctly. So there's a rule that I was taught that was it's called the 5-5-5 rule. This is 5 bullets maximum per page, 5 words per bullet maximum, 5 text slides maximum per presentation before you have some visual like a picture or a video or some way to break it up. So I think personally this is a pretty common rule, the 5-5-5 rule. Personally, I feel like that's kind of a lot. I try to adhere to the 3-5 rule. 3-5, 3-5, 3-5. So I try to go between 3 and 5. I think if you're holding fast to 5, that seems to be a little bit much. I try to hold it closer to 3. And then just a rule of thumb, if you're putting a PowerPoint presentation together, 1 slide is typically equals 1 minute. So if you've got a 30-minute presentation, probably shouldn't have many more than 30 slides. That's a pretty good rule of thumb there. For the bullet points, okay, I like to use an animation to appear. I usually just use the animation or fade in animation there. I don't like those flashy, really fancy, bouncing all over the screen. Those can be really, really distracting. All right. I also don't show all the bullets. I want people to focus on what I'm talking about now. And lastly, I will typically grayscale the other bullets so that what I'm talking about right now really stands out to the audience. So when we talk about PowerPoint and we look at the 3-5 rule, this is a blatant violation of that 5-5-5 rule here, right? So when you look at it, this is one way to present information. It's a good way to present information. Don't get me wrong. The people get what they need. This is what they can see if we're talking rigid pipe versus flexible pipe. But let's look at a better way to do that, right? Maybe a better way is to have less text and allow the presenter to speak about each of these, right? So this is a better way. And Randy, I'm going to ask you a question real quick. How much do you pay per slide in PowerPoint? What are you getting charged per slide?
I don't think it costs me anything for an extra slide.
Okay. So, all right. So it doesn't cost you anything. Mike, would you concur when you give a PowerPoint presentation? Are you charged per slide?
I think I would agree with that.
Okay.
No
PowerPoint,
charge.
bless their hearts, they don't charge you per slide. So feel free to use as many slides as you want. This is another way to do it, right? Keep it simple. Let's just focus on rigid pipe here. RCP, it's a structure bedded with soil. The quality control is done in the plant. For flexible pipe, these are your materials. It's a liner that requires the soil around it to be compacted to create the structure. The quality control is performed in the field, so it's installation sensitive. That's even a better way to do it, right? Now, I'm going to show you what I consider to be the best way to present this information, right? I'm going to use a visual aid. So how this works, if you look, you've got your flexible pipe system on the left-hand side. The pipe itself is flexible. So if you've got a flexible pipe, as that gets compressed, it's going to want to deflect outward. So it's very important that we build a stiff wall on either side of it to keep it from deflecting. Now, with a rigid system, if we load that, it's okay to have a little bit more flexibility on the side because the rigid pipe is not going anywhere because it is the structure. So to me, that's a much more efficient way of presenting that information. All right. Now, when we come to using visual aids and pictures, I am a big fan of using pictures to get my point across. A picture's worth 1,000 words, right? So if I can show it, instead of putting text on the screen, I want to do that. I want to use these pictures as best I can. However, there are some best practices on how we should be using pictures. For example, this is an okay example. It's not the worst I've seen. I'll just say that. I once saw a video, and Randy was at this training where this guy was giving us presentation on how to be an effective presenter, and I kid you not, he had 5 different images and 2 of them were videos. So he had 3 pictures and 2 videos all going at once on one slide. And that was when we all kind of started making the joke about, hey man, PowerPoint doesn't charge you per the slide. You ought to consider maybe splitting all those up. So instead of showing it like this, if it's important enough to show a picture of, right, I say give it its own slide and then talk about that picture. If you've got 4 slides on a screen or 4 pictures on a screen and you're going to talk about those, just give them their own and talk about those, right? Like this one, for instance. I've never seen any other, superheroes in any other pipe material, but here's Spider-Man in concrete pipe. So clearly the best. Anyway.
Is that you, Jason?
That is not me, actually. I know I've lost a little bit of weight this last year, but no, I'm not quite that slender yet. We'll get there. I don't know if anybody wants to see me in a spandex Spider-Man outfit, but I don't know. Give me another year. We'll see what happens. Then talk about your quarantine thing here. This is great if you get the COVID and your wife won't let you back in the house. We can provide you with an option there, right? Or if you're into BMX biking, here's a picture of someone doing a loop-de-loop there in a concrete structure. That's kind of cool. This is what I'm hoping to do in my backyard at some point. Really utilize that concrete pipe love that I have. All right. Now, ineffective PowerPoint. Okay, I'm going to show you an ineffective PowerPoint. An ineffective PowerPoint presentation is one in which the presenter includes every word that he or she will say in the presentation on each slide, and then proceeds to read the slide verbatim. Better yet is when a presenter turns his or her back to the audience and reads the slide because they did not position their computer in a way that allows him or her to look at the audience while reading. The audience will inevitably read ahead and zone out. Trust me, you do not want that. Okay, that's ineffective PowerPoint. Effective PowerPoint is one that's going to outline your key points. It's going to engage the audience, and I think most importantly, keep the focus on the presenter. We want that focus to be on that presenter to make sure that they're able to get that connection with the audience. That personal connection is so important. So we want to make sure we can keep that focus on the presenter. All right. So I'm going to talk next about some visual tips, some things that you should consider when you're putting your PowerPoint presentation together. All right. So what I like to do is I like to have just a simple layout. As you can see from this presentation that I've been doing, it's been very simple. Very easy to read. It's not too flashy. The animations haven't been distracting. I want them to focus on the words that I'm saying, not necessarily what's going on the screen and what's happening all around them, right? I want it to be laser focused on that. I always recommend a light background. That's for a couple of reasons. I touched on it in the beginning. It's if the lights have to be out, or if the lights have to be on, or if you're able to keep the lights on, which is preferred, you want a light background with dark text because it really pops a lot more. And it's much easier to read, actually. If you have a light background and dark text, is much easier to read than a dark background and a light text. Another thing that I always recommend is when you're making your PowerPoint, it should be printable. Sometimes someone's going to want to print these out and have notes, or maybe you want to print them out and provide notes to somebody else. So if it's printable, you can print those and hand them to people so that they can have them for future reference. But I always say if it can't show up on printing 6 slides to a page, it's probably too much text, or it's too many pictures, or it's too small. And you really need to rethink that, because you want it to show up when you print it. And if you have 50, 60 slides, you don't want to be printing out 50 pages. If you do 6 or 8 slides to a sheet, then you can get it done in, 8 to 10 pages. So that's not bad. So consider that when you're putting your PowerPoint together on what it should look like visually. All right. I'm going to now show you some examples of some of my favorite PowerPoint slides, and I hope that you enjoy these as much as I do, because these are just next level awesome. This is an actual slide. This is a PowerPoint slide that was that's given by some government entity talking about business coordination and whatnot. Now this one isn't nearly as bad as my absolute favorite. All right, if you were to go and Google worst PowerPoint slide ever, this is what comes up. This is an actual PowerPoint slide from a presentation given by the I believe it's the Defense Acquisition University, was giving this to the Department of Defense, and this was their slide. Okay, I mean, it is amazing. I'm impressed, honestly, at how bad it is. Like, it's my whole philosophy in life is you should be the very best or the very worst at something. Either way, you're going to be remembered, and someone's going to write a book about you. So this is just absolute. It's so bad, it's almost good. I'm almost impressed that somebody thought this was a good idea to make this a PowerPoint slide. So consider that as the worst PowerPoint slide ever. Too much going on. You're not going to be able to print it. It's not going to. I mean, you could print it if you had a plotter and you put 3 or 4 of these together. It might be able to show up, but you've got to figure out a way to break it down and smooth it out. So I love this slide for so many reasons. All right, this I'm going to show you some other slides that I've seen people actually in my industry give these presentations. All right, we taught one of these extremely technical engineers how to change the background on his slides. When he learned about that, he went crazy. Have no idea what the significance is of the snowflakes, but he wanted to have snowflakes in the back of his slide. Not only was it enough that it has white and blue background, but then he also chose a conflicting and contrasting blue-green color scheme to go along with it. The white blends in, it blurs out. This is a terrible slide. He also gave one about compaction requirements and soils. This is another one that he did. Again, it wasn't enough that the background was flashy. He then had to use a gold, a blue, a different shade of blue, black, and orange text on this. I mean, again, sometimes things are so bad you're almost impressed. This one is just a really, really bad way to convey information. Not only is it a lot of information on the page, which I understand sometimes you want to show a table and you need to explain what that table is. I get it. I'm sympathetic. I've got specs and things when we're giving technical presentations. It's really hard to present some of this stuff without having these tables in their entirety. However, if you're going to do that, let's be smart about how we do that, and it's not going to give people headaches when they look at it, because this background and this image is just too much. All right, this is another one. This is the example of dark background with white text. Compare this. This is what it looks like here. Compare this to this, right? It's night and day difference. Obviously night and day because of dark and light. Anyway, oh, bad joke. I've been around my kids too long. They think that stuff's funny, but I don't expect any of you to laugh at it. So night and day difference between dark background and light text versus light background and dark text. So let's talk a little bit about visual aids and what we should do. I said earlier that a picture's worth 1,000 words. I mean, a video is worth even more than that. So when we look at using visual aids in PowerPoint, I have some recommendations and some suggestions on how you can get the most out of those. All right, if you're going to use media, which is anything that's got sound, whether it's an audio file or a video, and if the video has sound, right, always embed that in PowerPoint. All right, I know a lot of people who will link to a YouTube video. I can't tell you how many times I've been sitting in a presentation and they say, oh, here it is, and they go to click, and the Wi-Fi is not working. They don't have the Wi-Fi password. The internet went down. The connection's too slow to show the PowerPoint through the presentation. They have to shut their PowerPoint presentation down to go to another page to look at the video. These things are all distracting. They all take the audience out, and it limits your ability to make that connection. So please, 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 if you take nothing else from this presentation, please, please embed your media. I hope I don't have to go down to the City Engineers Conference next year and see yet another presenter not embedding their media and trying to work through the technical difficulties of connecting and clicking and going. That it takes people out. It's so hard to do. So please embed your media. If you have questions on how to do this, I'm going to talk a little bit about it, but if you have further questions, you want me to help you, I am more than happy to sit down with you and visit with you on how to do that, because it's really, really easy, and it can make a huge difference in the flow and the way your presentation looks to the people that you're giving it to. So do not link it. That is my one key there. Don't link your media. All right. Also, don't rely on audio. I gave a presentation, one of my first presentations at this job. It was pretty funny. I was giving a presentation at the University of Utah, and I had just finished watching Parks and Recreation. I just finished it, and I thought, it'd be funny. I have all these funny clips from Ron Swanson, and everybody loves Ron Swanson, the world's favorite libertarian. And Ron Swanson gets in there, and I put all these videos of him saying all these funny quotes, and I'm like, all right, I'm gonna go in with these college kids that are gonna think I'm so cool. It's gonna be awesome. And I get there, and I'm like, okay, I need to plug this in. I'm gonna need audio. And they're like, oh yeah, there's no audio in this room. So if you can play it, it's gonna have to play from your laptop. And I'm like, there's 250 people in this room. Like, there's no way they're gonna be able to hear it on my little Surface. And they're like, well, can you do it without audio? And I'm like, I guess. So I relied on audio, and I got burned. I tried to salvage it by me doing all the quotes, all the Ron Swanson quotes. It's just not the same coming from some weird, some liberal weirdo like me when you want to hear a mustachioed libertarian talk about the government. So anyways, that was a disaster for me. I learned very early on, do not rely on audio, and always have a backup plan. If you get into a room and you realize, if you forgot to ask the question, now I ask the question, am I going to have a projector? Am I going to have a screen? Am I going to have audio connection? Is there going to be a microphone? I always ask those questions now, but I had to learn the very, very hard way, and you should always have a backup plan. All right. So let's talk about adding a video clip and how you embed those in and how we get these video clips. All right. When you're considering adding a video clip, you should always look for one that's good quality, right? You don't want it to be grainy and really choppy. That's always bad. It's distracting. So make sure it's a good quality video. All right. Make sure it's relevant and it can teach, or there's one exception. I sometimes will add a video clip in just to kind of relax and have a break. When we're doing extremely technical presentations, it can be really, really heavy for some of these people. So if you take a minute to just show a funny clip of something like I was doing with the Ron Swanson clips, a joke or someone. I always like to show fail videos, people falling down, Dude Perfect with their trick shots. I've got presentations where I show those. It's just a way to break things up and break up the monotony of the technical presentation and get them to relax a little bit and take a deep breath before we move on. So I like to download my videos from YouTube. If I find a video on YouTube that I like, you can download them. There's a few that I've used. I used to use YTD Downloader, but now they charge. What I liked about YTD Downloader, though, is that if I downloaded the video from YouTube, and there were some that had copyright things that wouldn't let you download, but what I really liked about this program was that if I downloaded a 5-minute clip or a 5-minute video, and I only wanted a 30-second clip, because my whole thing is I don't ever try to show a video longer than 30 seconds. I think people's attention spans wane, and even 30 seconds is a long video clip. So consider that. And this program allowed you to download it and then clip it to the area where you wanted it. So it was all a 2-in-1. I really like that. Now that they charge and they're not free, I don't love that. Also, when I did try to pay for it, though, it sent a fraud alert to Randy, and so I decided not to buy it because I thought, well, if this is coming from an untrusted place in Russia, maybe I shouldn't be doing that. So I shut that down. I've tried KeepVid. I did this just the other day. This is one that's online. You just copy the link in YouTube in there, and keepvid.ch. You'd copy the link, and it'll just download it in MP4 format for you. And then WinX YouTube Downloader is one that's a program that you can download. This is one that Randy uses that he told me about. I just downloaded it. I haven't used it much yet, but I do like it. It reminds me of YTD Downloader. It's free, so that's good. If you want to clip your videos, you're going to need a separate, third-party software to do that, either Windows Movie Maker or something like that, to clip those down and edit it a little bit. So consider that. Your WinX doesn't do that in the program, but those are 3 that I've used. There's plenty online if you just Google how to download from YouTube, but keep those in mind. When you put them into your PowerPoint, it's basically just a drag and drop. If you've got it in a file, it's no different than an image. You just drag it into your slide and drop it in there, and then it embeds it. It makes your files really, really large. So if you have a lot of videos, I have some presentations that have all of my videos embedded into there, and they're upwards of about 1 gigabyte on that. So it's pretty big. It can be a little bit overwhelming. So consider that if you're going to be copying and pasting. I always use my own laptop where I can, but if I have to put it on a jump drive and put it on someone else's laptop, I always get there early to make sure I can go through and make sure that all my videos still play and that it transferred correctly. So embedding videos and audio does make your file, your PowerPoint larger, but it also makes it go smoother when it works. So this is something that I actually learned between serif font and sans serif font. The serif font is one that has the little tails on it, and with those tails, they're kind of a fancier font, like a Times New Roman. I hate serif fonts. I'm not a big fan. I prefer a sans serif font, like a good Arial or Calibri or Tahoma. If you want to get really crazy, go ahead and mix in a little bit of Verdana. That's a great one. But a sans serif font is going to be thicker. It's got a uniform width around it. And I know it's kind of weird that we're getting to this level, but if you notice the sans serif, uniform width all the way around the letter. The serif font is narrower at spots so that it can have that tail and that flare and have that kind of fanciness about it. The serif font, depending on the projector you're using, it can get lost. It can get washed out a little bit. So I always recommend doing everything in a serif font. Or in a sans serif font. If you notice, PowerPoint defaults to a sans serif font. I believe the older versions used to default to Arial. The newer ones, I believe, default to Calibri is your main body font, but it is also a sans serif. So I recommend that. I know a lot of times we want to put emphasis on things, and we think if we write in capitals, it's better to provide emphasis. Word to the wise, underlining or bolding words is much better than all capitals, because writing in all capitals is more difficult to read. My suggestion is to always use a large font size. Don't use like this, a 10 or 12 point font size. 28 to 32 minimum, depending on the type of font you're using. I always tell people that if you if you use this font size, if you have a smaller font on there, it's almost like people are, it's almost like you're trying to hide something from people. That's kind of the thought process they go through. They see that small font and they go, oh, it's the fine print. What are they trying to hide from me? So be smart about your font size. You don't want that really small font there. All right. Now, we've talked a lot about presentation and tips and techniques on PowerPoint, but what happens when we get into a presentation and we're talking to someone who just doesn't have a clue what we're talking about? When we're presenting to maybe a city council who has no experience in this technical realm, or we've been invited to speak at our kids' school and we go in there and we're talking over all their heads. I'm sure a lot of us have been in there, right? So the key is, I'm going to give you a couple of points and suggestions here on what you can do when you're talking to people to make sure they're like my good buddy Drax the Destroyer from Guardians of the Galaxy. Drax the Destroyer, if you remember, he always says, nothing goes over my head. My reflexes are too fast. I will catch it. Because it can be really, really difficult if people aren't understanding what we're saying and things are going over their heads. So this is our key to help our audience be more like Drax and have those fast reflexes there, okay? When we're relating technical information, what I always do is, and I did this actually last night, I was giving a presentation this morning, and I asked my wife if I could give a presentation to her and if I could just work it out on her. So I always practice on civilians, someone who has very little technical experience and doesn't really know what you do for a living. So children, parents, spouses, friends, I like to practice on people who, if I'm not going to be talking to a bunch of engineers, I want to know that it's going to be well received and then get their feedback from it. So that's a good way to do it. Practice on someone who doesn't have that. All right. I will be completely honest with you. I've sat in presentations before where I had no idea what they were saying, but for some reason I didn't feel lost because they had so much energy and excitement. And I think that if you are just slowly draining on and drilling on, people lose interest, and that might be why they're not able to grasp what you're talking about, because there's just no energy and excitement. If they're excited and you have that energy and they're able to really listen and really focus on what you're saying, there's going to be a much better chance that they're going to be able to understand what you're saying and what you're trying to get across. So use that. There's another principle that I like to highlight, and I'm just going to go through this very quickly because we're running out of time. But and I wasn't planning on going into great detail. If someone would like to, at the end, I'm going to have a survey after this presentation that you can take. If there's any things, I know there's a lot of information I'm throwing at you today. This is just the overarching kind of that table of contents view. If there's anything that you would like more information on, or if you think it would be good to have a presentation that's just delves into one aspect of this, let me know in that survey that I'm going to send out after the webinar. I'd love to talk about any of these topics and delve into them a little bit more if you think that would be helpful for you. So just consider that in the survey. Be honest with what you'd like to hear more about what I talked about today, if anything. Maybe we covered it all well. But defeats by Dale Carnegie, this is what it means. Basically, the principle behind this is that everybody learns differently, right? Even engineers, even when we're getting technical, this can be expounded not just to people with little technical background, but even those when we're talking to technical people. Everybody learns differently, and everybody has that connection made differently. So DEFEATS is an acronym, and it stands for demonstrations, examples, facts, exhibits, analogies, testimonials, and statistics. So it depends on how these people learn that you're talking to. You may want to delve into that and have a few of these ready to go, a few demonstrations. Some people like to see the hands-on part of that. Some people want to hear about examples. Other people want to just hear what other people are doing. Give me some testimonials. What's Ogden City doing? What's Provo City doing? What's Farmington City doing? Right? Like what are all these other cities doing? Give me some testimonials of what they're saying. Right? These are all things that you can do. I always say, like, the analogy that I've used before when I'm talking to children or people about that don't understand concrete and cement. They always call concrete cement. Oh yeah, I tripped and fell on the cement. I always use the analogy of it's like baking a cake, where concrete is the cake and cement is the flour and the eggs are the aggregate and the water is the water. And when you mix it together and bake it, then it becomes a cake. And that's just an analogy. You're relating something back to what people know, right? That's the idea of an analogy. This is a great great tool to use. It's something that I've given presentations nationally on this defeats and how you can, relate to people better. So that's something that if you guys want to hear more about, I'd be happy to delve into that more at a later date. So when you're giving your delivery, don't ever apologize. Don't ever say, oh, I'm sorry, this is a really boring topic, because as I said earlier, no boring topics, only boring presenters, right? The ums and the uhs, try to eliminate those as much as possible. The best way to do that is to practice over and over and over again and rehearse and feel confident and comfortable with it. If you're umming and ahhing, it sounds like you really don't know what you're talking about, right? Include breaks. I like to have little breaks, as you've seen through this. I've tried to break it up with polls, with pictures, with little stories. Include a break. When you're giving technical information, you want them to have a little bit of a breather, like, okay, that was really heavy. Every 5 or 10 minutes, have a chance for them to kind of catch their breath a little bit, right? A few other just tips as you're going through the delivery. Try to move around a little bit if your situation allows you to. I know you can't see me because I've got my webcam turned off, but I've been walking around my office giving this whole presentation. So I like to move a lot. Move around if possible. That allows you to make that connection, and it makes the audience feel like you're involved a little bit more. Show some excitement and some energy, right? That's really important to get people in. This was when the Indians won their third game in the World Series, and they went up 3-1 in 2016. So yeah, good times. Don't bother asking me how that one played out, because it broke my heart. Anyways, make eye contact, right? Making eye contact with people when you're giving a presentation, whether there's 3 people or 300 people, do what you can to make eye contact with as many people as possible. It goes a long way, right? I like to rehearse and know how much time it's going to take so that I don't run out of time at the very end. Right? So know how much time it's going to take. Factor in some questions and answers and some of those things. I always start with a bang, and I try to get off to a good start by telling a story or engaging the audience early, whether it's through poll questions or some activity, something to get people pulled in from the beginning. Start with a bang, and then at the end, I like to wrap it up with a little bow. Tie it up with a conclusion. Sell some things, anything, challenge them, leave them with an idea, tell them, ask them if you could follow up later, something like that. Always have a good end, right? You don't want your last slide to be, well, I got 5 more slides, but it looks like we're out of time, so I guess we'll just end here. That's a really poor way to end your presentation. So keep that in mind. You need to rehearse it and have something at the end that you want to leave them with. I'm going to leave you with this short little story. I gave this presentation to a conference one time, and then the next day, one of my competitors showed up and gave a presentation, and they violated almost every single rule. They started out by apologizing because it was a really boring topic. They then followed that up with saying, showing like 5 or 6 pictures per slide. They had really small font. They read from the text that they had on the slide. It was actually almost comical. It was almost like we had planned it. Like I had seen their presentation, and I went ahead and said everything that they did and tried to point it out wrong. But it was just kind of funny for a lot of people that they saw me giving these effective presentation techniques, and then my competitors violated almost every single one of them. They also, just to summarize and tie this back in, they ran out of time at the end and said, well, it looks like I didn't get through anything, so we'll just end there. This is a good stopping point. Thanks for your time. I'm gone. As I mentioned before, I like to end with my 3 takeaways. Hopefully you've learned today what it takes to make a good presenter, and understand that we are all presenters, and what makes a good presentation. And we went over tips to make it better. Thanks again, everybody. We appreciate your time. Have a good one.
All right. Well, thank you, Jason. We appreciate you taking the time to give this great webinar. If you have any questions about this topic or any of the other products that we discussed in this webinar, feel free to reach out to me at jason.allen@oldcastle.com or visit oldcastleinfrastructure.com for more information.